Hello, 911? Yes, I need some rock and roll, please. Yes, rock and roll to come to my rescue. It rescued me. And it'll rescue you. Don't call again? Fair enough. I guess the first responders weren't Beach Boys fans. In our last couple episodes, we talked about the early 80s greatest hits packages for the Beach Boys. 1981's 10 Years of Harmony, 1982's Sunshine Dream. Neither of which was a big success for the group, and despite each having a major single, they didn't really push the group back into the limelight the way they should have. 1983 wasn't especially kind to the group either. Their sort of new release, Rarities, featuring rare and previously unreleased archival material, did not chart and became the black sheep of the Beach Boys catalog for many years. Dennis Wilson, the drummer, passed away in December of 1983, and the group didn't do a whole lot for 1984. There were a few things, such as their contribution to the Up the Creek soundtrack album, a little song called Chasing the Sky, but there wasn't anything of substance, and I'm sure many people felt that the Beach Boys had run their course and were done. That brings us to 1985, when they released their big comeback album, The Beach Boys, also known as Beach Boys 85. This album produced a couple charting singles, most notably a little number that's still performed live today, called Get Ya Back. Get Ya Back peaked about number 26 on the Hot 100, and actually peaked number 2 on the Adult Contemporary chart, so went over pretty well. Again, still in the live set today, on a lot of box sets and compilations, even got an updated rewrite in 2017 for Mike Love's album Unleash the Love. So the mid-80s showed there was still a market for Beach Boys stuff. Well, as it happened, 1986 was technically the group's 25th anniversary. So we have to have something special for that, don't we? We got the first sort of major box set, their cassette collection, 25th anniversary. We'll talk about this someday. But today's subject also ties in with that 25th anniversary, and that's the greatest hits package, Made in U.S.A. Made in U.S.A. is 2 records designed to sort of encapsulate the group's entire career from the beginning up through the present day. Let's take a look at the track list. On that first LP, we have Surfin' Safari, 409, Surfin' U.S.A., Be True to Your School, Surfer Girl, and Dance Dance Dance. Flip that over for Fun Fun Fun, I Get Around, Help Me Rhonda, Don't Worry Baby, California Girls, When I Grew Up to Be a Man, and Barbara Ann. Take a look at the second record for Good Vibrations, Heroes and Villains, Wouldn't It Be Nice, Sloop John B., God Only Knows, and Caroline No. And finally, flip that second record over for Do It Again, Rock and Roll Music, Come Go With Me, Get Ya Back, Rock and Roll to the Rescue, and California Dreamin'. Quite a collection. Let's take a moment, see what the records look like. Or a record, because they both look basically the same. We get the Capital Rainbow design. Very nice. They're very thin records, very flimsy, but they do look nice, and these ones play just fine, so I can't personally complain. And of course, Made in USA made it to several other formats as well. We'll get into those more near the end of the video. The big centerpiece for Made in USA is the very extensive set of liner notes by Beach Boys author David Leaf. David Leaf has written all kinds of things on the group, and while there are a few interesting claims on here that I'm not sure 100% accurate, generally speaking, I would definitely trust David Leaf. He starts off the liner notes by talking about Surfin', the group's first song. Surfin' is not on this set. It very rarely pops up on hits packages. It's usually saved more for archival stuff, anthologies, box sets, and whatnot. But he gets a pretty big review of it on here, which is weird for a song that's not featured. And then he jumps into Surfin' Safari and 409 and how the group went from a garage band to greatness. He talks about their influences like Chuck Berry and the Four Freshmen all get shout-outs. Their rivalry with the Beatles is mentioned several times and how the group kind of grew and evolved over time. Fun 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 gets a big write-up, and there's talk about a burger stand that apparently inspired the song, known as colloquially as Frosty's Burgers. He talks a lot about that. I didn't know that till I read these liner notes. Pretty interesting stuff. He talks about like how Brian Wilson disliked the recording of California Girls and felt it wasn't good, which I think is strange because Brian Wilson went on record that California Girls is one of his favorite Beach Boys songs and how it's basically their anthem. He talks about Help Me Rhonda, how it's the single version, not the album one. And that is true of most of the songs on here. They tend to use the singles like Be True to Your School does. But some also use the albums, though, notably Rock and Roll Music. Do It Again does not have the workshop sounds. Caroline No does not have the train sounds. So we get kind of a mixture. But overall, I would say the more common or the more popular version of each song is used is probably the best way to look at it. And then we get a big section on Good Vibrations and its importance to music and how it still continues to inspire artists even up through today, or up through 1986, but that would extend to today, of course, and how Good Vibrations started during Pet Sounds, which is true as well. That's why many Pet Sounds box sets have Good Vibrations tracks on them, because it was kind of in its early stages at that point. It's a very nice write-up. Heroes and Villains also gets a big section. That one talks about how it was the centerpiece of the unreleased Smile album, and how supposedly there's an 11-minute mix that survives, and there are definitely a lot of outtakes and alternate takes and stuff if you have one of those Smile Session box sets. So although I don't know that it was ever prepared as an 11-minute song, there's certainly enough material to stretch it to 11 minutes. Leaf also mentions that it was recorded in an empty swimming pool to act as some kind of echo chamber. That I didn't know either. I don't know. A nice section on Do It Again and how the group wanted to be more nostalgic. He mentions things like American Graffiti. Interestingly, he misspells graffiti on the liner notes. Don't know what that's all about. Mike Love is given a lot of credit for Do It Again and also for covering Rock and Roll Music and how his vocal sort of helped to sell the song. I don't know. I tend to put those two tracks more on Brian Wilson's plate than Mike Love's, but you never know. I'm sure it was a collaboration both times. Come Go With Me gets a big shout out. He mentions that Al Jardine loved classic rock and classic rock covers and stuff, and how he was the king of covers amongst the Beach Boys. So Come Go With Me is also mentioned as being an 80s single, despite having been recorded in the 70s. So at least he was honest there, and not trying to paint it as a hit when it was new, but rather a hit that became famous kind of retroactively. And then Get You Back, he notes, of course, that as it was their biggest new single pre this set, gets a little write-up about how, hey, the Beach Boys are still going strong into the 80s. And then we bump off the track with what were, or bump off the album, excuse me, not the track, with what were the two newest singles, and really the two big draws for this set. One was their single, Rock and Roll to the Rescue, the song I was mentioning at the beginning when I was horsing around with the phone. This is a promo copy of that single. It's a very catchy song, and I'm kind of surprised it hasn't had a resurgence yet. It fits in with something like Bob Seger's Old Time Rock and Roll, that kind of thing. It's those sort of vibes. There is a music video for it. You can find it on YouTube. Very 80s, very cheesy, but again, it sells the song. And I think this is one that a lot of people today would really get into if it was more out there. I feel like it's not. Rock and Roll to the Rescue also got a 12-inch single, and I talk about this in my video on Beach Boys 12-inch singles, 1 foot of fun, fun, fun. We go all over this one here, but I like Rock and Roll to the Rescue. It was a minor charting hit, nothing huge, peaking about number 68. Really hasn't had much of a life outside of this album, though, sadly. Kind of wish it did. I think it could be successful again. The other new song being pushed with this album, you can actually see it, I guess, on the hype sticker, which I forgot to point out to you, was their cover of California Dreamin', and this one has a much bigger following. Here's my single copy. Came with an adapter, that's what the yellow thing is. Backed with Lady Liberty, which was new but not included in this set. Lady Liberty remains exclusive to this single. It was a rewrite of Lady Linda. Lady Linda didn't catch on in the U.S., and honestly, I don't think Lady Liberty stood much of a chance of doing that either. It was a good song, I guess, for 4th of July, but didn't have, like, hit potential. But California Dreamin' did. It's popped up on many later sets, like The Warmth of the Sun, Best of the Brother Years, aka 20 Good Vibrations Part 3, that kind of stuff. It's been in their live set for a very long time, and it wasn't a major charting hit, peaking only about number 57, but it was successful enough, I think, to help sell this album. And today, California Dreamin' remains one of their most popular covers. It was the lead track on that Covered by the Beach Boys album that I reviewed. So all told, Made in USA is an interesting, I guess you could say, kind of like a pseudo box set, trying hard to encapsulate everything important into one handy package. Not everything gets an equal shout out in the liner notes. Not everything is maybe the wisest choice. For example, an alternate take of Wouldn't It Be Nice is used instead of the original due to a lack of, I guess, access to the original materials. The Still Cruisin' album uses the same mix as this, which we'll talk about that eventually when we get to Kokomo. But let's look at the other formats. So you could always buy Made in USA on vinyl, but you can also get it on cassette. And the one thing I like about this cassette tape, this might be a slightly later one because I don't know if they were using the clear cassettes in the mid-80s, but we get the entire set of liner notes there. Granted, you need a magnifying glass to read them, but they are indeed there. And that's nice too. When we looked at 10 Years of Harmony on cassette, you know, you couldn't get the lyrics. Come on, get out of here. There we go. You couldn't get the lyrics on there. You could only get the artwork. Capitol was having a successful time with their Beach Boys reissues, so it makes sense that they would be pushing the new albums on cassette. And of course, the newest thing at the time, compact disc, and indeed Made in USA, was released to CD, I believe a couple different times. It is no longer in print now because, you know, other sets came by and kind of supplanted it. Just as I think this was made to replace Endless Summer as, you know, the best collection for the group, other stuff would come along, which we will get to in this series, that would kind of dethrone this one too. Made in USA was described as a slow but steady seller, only peaking about number 96, which is better than the previous hits packages had been, but eventually going double platinum and beyond. Indeed, if it was still in print, or had been in print recently, it would probably be much higher than that. But, so people were buying this, maybe not immediately, maybe stopping to think about it and saying, oh, do we really need to invest in another Beach Boys 2 LP set, that kind of thing. But they were buying it, and in the end, it's a really nice tribute to the group. One highlight being a dedication to Denny, there at the bottom, along with the credits, the different artists and stuff who worked on this. Admittedly, I think very fitting cover art. Bruce Johnston gets his photo on here a few times. That was uncommon in the 80s. And it has that kind of Americana vibe, nostalgic Americana vibe that I think suits it really well. So the big question might be, what would happen if Made in USA was just one record? What if they couldn't do a 2 LP box set kind of job? That, my friends, will be the subject for our next episode, our next video discussion, when we look at the single record version of Made in USA. Until then, my friends, go out there and be heroes, not villains. And always keep a smile on your face. And I'll see you next week. Thank you. Wow, I did much better that time. Whew.